What is this thing?
Is this a Game Boy? Why is it so chunky? Weird. What's up with these colors? Weird.
Game Boy?
So, I made this thing. Just a extra large, hefty Game Boy Color. Why? Very soon, I plan to take a flight, an extremely long flight. So I need something that's gonna keep me entertained, but isn't gonna get banged up too easily. And that's kind of where this comes in. It's a Game Boy Color to keep me preoccupied, but it's in a custom designed shell that I have, which makes it extra beefy and hardy, able to withstand air travel and urban walking and all that. And this project is much like any of the other projects I have for my designs, where I start out with a list of demands, I guess, things that I need out of the design or the system. And in this case, I needed something durable and portable, and preferably has my design aesthetic, although this is kind of a wild offshoot of how I normally design things. Took inspiration from just a standard Game Boy Pocket, because it's my favorite style of the Game Boys. And also things like Walkmans and stuff like that. The old 80s Walkmans, the big chunky ones, you know, I really like that. And after taking all these design needs or decisions into account, this is kind of what I come up with. This weird amalgamation of a Game Boy and like a Walkman, Casio G-Shock, something real weird and slightly bastardized. Going over this like it's a design brief is quite dry and boring, so I'm just gonna do a brief assembly, just roughly what it takes to put one of these together. And this is not an assembly guide by any means, but more of just a look on the internals and what makes it unique. The first thing you might notice with this design is that these sidewalls are very thick, and that's to help with impact resistance. And for my design, I didn't want to use the standard tri-wing screws hardware to hold my shell together, so I'm using these brass inserts along with some very large screws. These are M3 socket caps. They are incredibly cool looking and very, very strong. You can see that in my shell design there are a few cutouts. One is for the power switch, and I had to design my own power switch to interact with the Game Boy Color system, because the walls are roughly 7mm thicker on each side, so you can't use just a standard power switch. And the same goes for the volume wheel. The volume wheel on the standard Game Boy Color is very small, so I substituted mine with a volume wheel from a DMG, which is a little bit larger diameter and also thicker, which makes it easier to use in this shell. The top portion of the shell basically holds everything. It holds the Game Boy Color motherboard, the charging system, the face buttons, the lens, the display, basically everything. Since this is a rather unique or odd design, I'm going to go with some unique and odd colors for my shell. I want the buttons and the shell to kind of clash with each other, something that is very visible. As for the mods that I have for my Game Boy Color, I'm going with an IPS kit. These backlight kits are really, really nice. I'm just going to clean mine because I manhandled it earlier. But this kit specifically is really nice because it has on-screen display and functions. So you can adjust the display to fit a different window or lens, for example. In my build, I'm using a Game Boy Pocket lens, so the screen opening isn't exactly the same as a Game Boy Color. So the on-screen display allows me to recenter it into the correct space and orientation. Other mods that I've added for my Game Boy Color are having a lithium battery pack, and I have a fairly large lithium battery pack with mine. The flight that I'm taking is roughly 14 hours, and although this battery won't last 14 hours, it should at least last roughly 6 or 7, maybe even 8 hours if I'm being extra conservative with the backlight on my display. To charge the lithium battery pack, I have a TP4056, and there's some contention around the TP4056 because it generates quite a bit of heat whenever it's charging, but I've stationed the charge board far away from the lithium battery pack, so there should be no risk in having heat from the charger affect the lithium battery pack. And it may seem like the shell is in a bit of a rough state, and that's because it is. I sanded the print down as much as I could, or at least as long as I could stand sanding PLA, but PLA doesn't exactly sand the best, but it's a really great material for its flexibility and like ease of use, I suppose. So there is a little bit of a print lines and some scratches here and there, but that's completely fine to me. This is supposed to be a rugged system. This isn't a show system. And I guess I didn't check the inside of the lens too thoroughly for dust. There's a speck that's left behind, but the system is working. There are some hot spots on the LCD. This is a very used and beat up LCD that I'm putting in the system. Just something that I don't really have to care about too much, but it's gonna work perfect for what it is, just a portable, on-the-go Game Boy Color that's gonna travel with me internationally. Thanks for checking out my video on this very unique and odd design, and if you like this kind of stuff, I do a lot of update and build logs on my Instagram. I also have a Patreon where I supply some of my print files to even the lowest tiers of my Patreon, so that maybe you yourself, if interested, could build a monstrous, chunky, overly colorful, and overly designed Game Boy Color of your own. And once again, thanks for watching.